Hello, besties, and welcome to another episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your hosts, Rosa and Rachel. Today, we have a special guest with us. We're joined by Robin, who is a former Jersey girl and the founder of Around the World with Kids. Robin travels far and wide with her husband and 2 kids, turning every trip into a family adventure. She's here to share her top tips for traveling with children, ways to save money on family getaways, and must-do activities at destinations around the globe. So whether you're planning a weekend road trip or an international escape, Robin's got the insights to help make family travel smoother and a lot more fun, which is amazing because I have so many coworkers with families and they're always asking me how to travel. So I really think this episode will be beneficial to them as well. So welcome to the show, Robin. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Sure.
We're so excited to have you here. I know Rachel kind of introduced you a little bit, but do you want to tell us more about what you do as far as when it comes to also like social media and things that you share online with your blog?
So my blog started going to be about 13 years ago now when I was going to go to India for a month during my maternity leave with my second child. And I decided that they were not going to remember this, so I wanted to document it in some way so that way in the future they could see what it was about. So it actually really started almost as an online journal for people to follow along. But it just grew from there and I continued to do it. And now I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old and we've been to 4 continents. I'm trying to remember how many countries we've been to together, maybe around like 12, I'd say, most of the states in the US. The kids, we just got back from a trip from Hawaii to celebrate my oldest. And so I've just continued on my blog and now also on my Instagram channel and Facebook and TikTok, because you got to be everywhere these days, to share as many of these tips and tricks and destinations that we've been to as possible. Because what has happened is so many of my friends have been like, oh my God, how do you do this? How can we continue to do this? How can we get to travel the same way that you guys do? We're not a nomad family. We don't travel around. I have a regular job. My husband has a regular job. Both of my kids are in public school. So we've really learned how to focus in on times off of school, occasionally taking them out of school.
It's totally fine. Totally fine. I always say as a teacher, when the kids come to me and they're like, hey, I'm going on a family trip, I am all for it because peak periods are so expensive. And I just tell them to enjoy their trip and we'll figure it out when we get back.
I love teachers like you. I love working with teachers like you. You know, and then how we use points and miles to save and travel more. And then also we're in California and we don't have any family nearby. So to see any family, we have to travel. So we've also figured out how to, when we travel, turn it into adventure. So last summer, we went to New Jersey for a couple of weeks so we could visit the grandparents. And I included an East Coast road trip where we drove up and we saw Boston and Hanover, New Hampshire, Providence. I'm not saying this in order that we went. Hartford.
It's all good.
And New Hyde Park, New York. So
Sounds like a fun adventure.
it really was. And it's nice that they're teenagers now. It's a little bit different from when they were younger. You know, when they were younger, the road trips were hard.
I couldn't last more than like an hour without complaining. So I'm sure my parents appreciated it when I was a little older as well.
So yes, for my oldest, they really had a 2-hour limit. So at 2 hours, almost on the dot, they would start fussing whatever car seat or seat they were in. And we would have to find a place to pull over and let them run around for a little while. So that, you know, so if you imagine San Francisco to LA is a 6-hour road trip, most people could do that in one sitting, maybe one break. No, we were doing a minimum of 2. If you didn't hit LA traffic, and imagine hitting LA traffic and you hit that
That's 2 hours
mark.
Right there.
Exactly. Right? It's just like 2 hours to go 4 miles.
Exactly.
We're still in the city limits, kids.
But this time around, obviously they're older. My husband couldn't join us for this trip, so it was just me and my oldest and my daughter. And everyone got jobs. My oldest was the navigator and managed the radio. My youngest was, you know, snack person. She was the one who had to make sure I had my snacks. My oldest had their snacks. And on top of that, now that they're older, we were able to do audiobooks. So when they were younger, we would, maybe around kindergarten, first grade age, we started to introduce some audiobooks like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and, you know, the Judy B. Jones series. Those were great audiobooks to listen to in car rides that kind of helped them as they got older stretch out those 2-hour marks and kept them engaged and off of phones and doing other things. We've continued that tradition, and actually on this road trip, We Were the Lucky Ones, which is actually a pretty in-depth novel about World War II. But after this road trip, we went to Europe, where we went through Warsaw, Auschwitz, Prague, and Berlin. So I really wanted them to be sort of prepped and ready and understanding the history of what went on there. And a lot of We Were the Lucky Ones takes place in Poland.
That's pretty cool. And I never really thought, I mean, at least when my daughter was younger, I was pretty fortunate because we would get in the car and she would knock out, even if it was like a 5 minute drive or like 3 hours. So we essentially could have driven anywhere, but we weren't really big on doing road trips when she was younger. So, like back then, we had our daughter young. So, financially, we couldn't really afford to travel as much. So, we only would pick maybe like one destination a year. And Michael and I love just kind of laying on the beach. So, that was like our go to, was doing anything beach related, just because we found it to be easier, especially with the toddler. You know, we didn't have to worry about like Europe, it's great, but you go to certain countries, it's hot, you're dealing with steps, it's not stroller friendly, crowds. So we kind of wanted to avoid that. So we didn't really start navigating and traveling like further out until our daughter was a little bit older. But I feel like when I hear people say, oh, once you're going to have kids, your travel days are over. And that's not true. Like, yes, it's more challenging. Yes, there's more planning involved, but you have to be strategic and just find things that works for you, works for your family. And obviously, every child is different. Like you said, your kids had a time limit. So after 2 hours, you kind of have to either stop or figure something out. So I think it's great that you were being adventurous and taking your kids all over the world and 4 continents. That's pretty impressive too.
That's really awesome. I love it.
So it's funny you say that, but that's kind of what drove my whole India adventure. So when I was pregnant with my oldest, I was in Hawaii on my baby moon, and some woman was like, "Oh, enjoy the travel now. Once you have that baby, you're not going to do it anymore." Yeah, you would be surprised what people tell pregnant women. And I was really mad. And I was like, that's not fair. I don't want to give up travel. I'm not going to give it up. And so when I had my oldest, I had taken a longer maternity leave, and I wanted to spend that last month of maternity leave in India. But everyone talked me out of it. The baby's too little. They're going to get sick. So instead we went when my oldest was 9 months old. And that was a nightmare. I mean, I loved being in India. I loved visiting my family. My husband's family is Indian, did I mention that? But a 9-month-old is crawling, pulling themselves up on things, pulling things off shelves. They were not fully breastfed at that point, so they were half on formula, half on solids with like 3 drops of milk a day from me. They were touching everything and putting their hands in their mouth. And then 9 months is when they hit that like stranger danger stage. And so they didn't want to go with any of the family members that never saw this child.
Oh, the
It
poor
was
baby.
And I said, this is crazy. Next baby, we're going during my maternity leave. And so, when I got pregnant, right away, I started planning. I'm like, it'll be like October. That's a good time frame. Let's take the baby when they're 3 months old. I talked to the pediatrician. The pediatrician was like, are you comfortable pushing up some of these vaccines? So she has all the 6-month vaccines before we go. I said, yep. And she was cool. I'm comfortable with you going with the baby. And at 3 months old, baby was 100% breastfed. Still wasn't sleeping through the night, which actually was kind of perfect because they didn't have to deal with the time change, right? They would just wake up in the middle of the night, see it was dark, nurse a little bit and go back to sleep, right? And then all of the family members, she was at that stage where they start smiling and cooing and they go with everybody.
So
And
sweet.
so everyone loved playing a little deer. Now the 2-year-old, that one was a little bit of trouble. But that was what drove me to say, like, okay, if I can do this, if I can take a 3-month-old to India and a 2-year-old to India, then I can really travel anywhere. Because
Yeah, you
yes,
could do anything. That was
yeah,
like on
exactly.
hard mode right there.
Exactly. Yes, I will admit, most of the time we stay with my family, but we did travel around. We stayed in hotels. And India is a surprisingly family-friendly country. Every mall has a mother's room, and this mother's room is not like a small dinky room that's never attended. Like there's an attendant there who's cleaning everything for you. There's a play area for the little kids to play in while mom is nursing. There are other moms there who are insisting on helping you with things. There's free diapers. We would go into the hotel, and I remember one time, like, I slipped on something and I was almost falling. And this attendant just came out, grabbed the baby with one hand, grabbed me with the other. And then, like, once I was steady, was holding the baby. He's like, no, you can't hold the baby until you're steady and okay. And he's like, just making sure, bouncing around, making sure the baby's okay. Like, just
Helpful. That's
Really
pretty awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And I have to ask Robin because I'm curious. Everyone who's listened to this podcast knows I'm a nervous flyer. How was the flight with the 2-year-old and the 3-month-old? Because from California to India, that's quite a long, long time to be in the air.
no matter how you cut it, it's 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So I will actually say that was one of our best flights to India because we were on Air Emirates, which is an amazing family-friendly airline. One of the things that we did was we actually, which I think most people wouldn't do, but for me, it made it easier. We brought his car seat on the flight, even though they don't really use them in India. It was mostly because he was used to the car seat. And so I knew if I strapped him into the car seat on the plane, then he would know he was supposed to stay there, as opposed to just the little clip. This kid was going to run everywhere. And I had one of those things you could attach to the back of the car seat to turn it into a stroller almost. So I could wheel him in the car seat all through the airport. So being strapped to the car seat really helped. We also had bulkhead seats because I had a newborn or 3-month-old at the time with us. And so we were able to like put her in the little bassinet when she wanted to sleep. Now I will say, I feel like this flight had a lot of turbulence and we weren't allowed to have the bassinet out a lot. But at 3 months old, she was pretty easygoing and wanted to be in arms
Yeah, for
anyway.
sure.
Yeah. Like I said, the 2-year-old was the one that had to constantly be entertained. I would also say that I maybe introduced electronics early.
No shame in that.
No,
No shame.
especially on a flight that long, I would
Yeah.
be like, have all the iPads, watch what you want, whatever you need.
It's like survival mode. It's like whatever it takes to make
Exactly.
sure this kid does not
Sure.
cry.
So pre-COVID, I would say the kids were really good. They always had like some device. They usually had one of our older devices that didn't have phone service that, we would download a bunch of their apps and movies on. And the kids knew those weren't allowed to be used at home. They were only allowed to be used when we were traveling. So they were actually really excited when we would get in a car or we would go on a plane because they knew. And by the way, they weren't allowed to use them in the airport either. The airport was for running around and getting out all of your energy. You don't get to get the device until you're sitting in the plane strapped and you have to put the seatbelt on yourself, right? Then you may have the device. And then they're like little zombies.
It's good.
That's a great idea.
Exactly. But that's a good way for them to kind of also feel like
Yeah.
looking forward to like, all right, once I'm on the seat, then I get to have my
Exactly.
playtime with the device. So that's a very good strategy.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it worked really well for us. I would say COVID changed everything for everyone. My kids were 7 and 10. 7 and 10 when COVID hit. And so that just got hard. They started using those devices to communicate with their friends and play online with their friends. And now I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old that I have to remind maybe they shouldn't be looking at their phone while they're crossing the street.
Yeah. It's like a whole nother set of rules. It's like, every stage is a little bit different because, like I said
Yeah.
earlier, at least my daughter, she was pretty easygoing. I remember the first time we actually took a flight, it was just to Orlando, and she was 11 months at this point. And going there, she slept the whole ride. I remember someone sitting next to us, they were like, "You had a baby?" And then I was like, "Yeah. She's been here this whole flight." She was really, really good. But on the way back from Orlando, I forgot her formula at my cousin's house because we were running late. And yeah, so that was a big, big fail. So on the way back, she was not as calm and
Not
quiet.
happy.
She was a very, very cranky child. And that was,
Yeah.
obviously on me. And we're in the airport. We couldn't even find her formula anywhere. So that was a big fail. So if you have a toddler, a baby, especially who's on formula, please pack your formula.
Yeah.
My
Find those
God, yeah.
passengers and thankfully it was only like 2.5-hour flight, but
Yeah.
that was rough. That was very
Yeah,
rough.
I can
something like
imagine.
that happened to my parents. So when I was very, very young, I was still in formula. I don't remember if it was the Cayman Islands, it was one of the Caribbean islands, and a tropical storm was set to come in at some point, and everywhere was sold out of the specific formula that I wanted. So my parents were like in a panic trying to find this formula. And finally, my dad found like the very last one. And he was like, thank God, because they were trying all these different formulas. I just was not having it. I was crying. I was like, no, no, I don't want this formula. There's a storm coming, and they just cannot find it. So they finally found the last one in one of the pharmacies somewhere, and they were so relieved because my mom even said, like, yeah, we don't know what we would have done if we didn't find that
It would have
formula
been
for you.
chaos. It definitely
My
would have been
goodness.
chaos.
Yeah.
But I know, like, packing, like, especially when you're traveling with a younger child, it involves a lot of things. Like you said, for specifically in your situation, you were bringing a car seat, but also like having to pack a stroller. Like,
Yeah.
now I feel so bad when I see parents, especially like if it's just one parent with multiple children navigating all those things. I try to help out sometimes because I just think about that. I'm like, I was always very fortunate that whenever I traveled, I had my partner. So I had that help and assistance. But, the whole packing part. So it's like, what essential items are like must have when traveling with kids, especially at that younger age?
So, yeah, I was about to say it always depends on the age and stage that you're at. When you have the little ones, always say, pack enough. And it's funny, parents had bought formula and came, and I will tell you, when I went to India, I went with a month and a half supply of like the types of foods that my oldest child liked. I actually didn't pack formula because she was breastfed at the time, but I remember packing all of the foods that he would like because I was like, if he's not going to eat whatever's there, we're up a creek. This kid's going to scream its head off, right? So, I had a ton of their snacks. I joked that I had a suitcase full of diapers and filled it with souvenirs on the way back. I'd say traveling domestically, you only need enough diapers for the first couple of days of your trip, and then you can buy wherever you are. But when you're traveling internationally, I actually encourage you to bring the diapers and you're used to, just because it can be harder in a foreign country to really find what works. And then sometimes in India, to be honest, the diapers don't usually have the same quality that they have in the US. That was also another thing to think about. And then of course, whatever comfort item your child needs. Both my kids had like a little lovey they were attached to. My oldest had a pacifier they were attached to. Something that was comfort and from home was always something important. To be honest, things like clothes, shoes, socks, I mean, a credit card anywhere will always solve that problem, right? Making sure you have an extra outfit, making sure you have enough to get through the first few days is important. But other than that, I think just having those comfort items and those items that they can't do without are really the most important ones. Now, once you get up to the like toddler kids stage, it's actually more around the kids stage, the preschool stage, I would say, is when I started teaching my kids how to pack on their own because I was done with that chore.
I love that though. Teach them responsibility. It's time to pack your own stuff.
Yeah.
But it's smart too because it kind of, helps you alleviate the stress of having to do it. But more importantly, I feel like I did that a lot with my daughter. Same thing. I would have her pick out outfits just to kind of get her excited for the trip.
Yes.
And like, let's be honest, she was like 3 years old. She had no idea when I'm like, we're going to Dominican Republic. All she can think about is like, oh yeah, I have a bathing suit. That means like a pool or whatever the case was. But I feel like that also helps get them excited for the destination as well.
Great. So I'd always have them lay out their outfits on the bed and I would inspect and I'd be like, no, we're going to the beach. You don't need this sweater, right? No, we're going to the snow. You can't bring this bathing suit, right? So like we would sort of, level set. And now they're much better about picking out their outfits and what we're going to do. But also, I think what was really important at that kid stage, like I said, is that's when I would start making sure we had the fully charged electronics, battery backup, wire to charge on the phone, to charge on the plane, and then again, clothes, especially sometimes if your kids have sensory issues. My oldest does have some sensory issues, so we always make sure that we're getting clothes that's not going to cause skin sensory problems with them, comfortable shoes that they're not going to be upset about. So that was also really important. Just keeping track of like those types of sensory issues that your kids might have. My oldest has been using noise canceling headphones since they were younger. They're very sensitive to noise, and that just helps them from being overwhelmed in loud areas. So understanding, again, I mean, they're older, but they still have those comfort items that they need to bring, right? You as the parent knows the child the best as to what those comfort items are and always making sure that they're on the list. And then with the teenagers, you just need to pack a lot of patience.
Even with adults, I need more patience for Michael than Samantha.
I've done some field trips with my high school students, and not at this school, but the previous school I worked at, I did 2 field trips to Boston that were overnight with students. And believe it or not, like the students themselves were fine. I thought they were really funny and nice to spend time with. But some of the adults, I was just like, by the end of it, like, I'm over this. Goodbye.
What you mean? I think, we went to Hawaii this last trip, and my daughter is almost 13. My oldest, it was their Quince trip. They're actually 15 and a half, but it was their Quince trip. And, it was interesting because we had done a trip over the summer to Europe, which was just go, go, go. We went from like all these different historical sites and museums and, different activities to this trip. My oldest was like, I just want to relax, right? I want to go snorkeling. I want to hang out at the beach. I just really want to relax. And so it was an interesting trip because they were really driving the agenda, and the kids were really happy to just kind of hang out by the pool, hang out by the beach, not being required to wake up early, not being required to go to different places. And it kind of made me think like, oh yeah, sometimes these guys need a rest too. I mean, I forget how much pressure is on them right now. And, we think of ourselves as needing a trip, but they actually sometimes need that downtime too. Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell my students whenever it's like the day before winter break or the day before spring break, I'm like, whatever you do, don't think about English class. I want you guys to sleep, do whatever you want, relax, spend time with your friends, have fun, but no English work, no pressure on yourself. The time's for you. And they always love it that I don't assign homeworks over breaks, which I don't know why someone would do that, but I guess
You're
it happens.
really nice. My oldest science teacher
You.
assigned a science homework over spring break, and we were in Hawaii
Kidding me.
the
Oh my
entire time.
God.
And by the entire time, I mean, we flew in on a red eye on the Monday morning.
No.
I don't want to grade over my spring break. Why would I assign an essay? I understand sometimes, like with the curriculum, it could be tough, but for me, absolutely not. I'm like, no way. And I also know if I assign something over break, they're not going to do it. So I try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. But that's, you bring up a good point, Robin, as far as like, sometimes we think as parents, because we're busy with work, that we're the ones who need to decompress. I remember, I think at this point I was 18 years old. My parents were living back in Dominican Republic at the time. And this was my first year in college. And I was also working part-time. And I remember going back to visit them for spring break. And we went to like a resort. And I was like in bed by 9 o'clock. And my mom's like, what are you doing? Like, you're on vacation. Come on, let's go. They had a little nightclub by the beach and stuff. She was like, let's go listen to music. I was like, Mom, I just want to sleep. Like, I am so tired. I just want to sleep. She's like, but you're on vacation. I'm like, yeah. And on this vacation, I just want to sleep. So sometimes I think we kind of forget that it's nice to be able to go to destinations, visit museums, tick off all of these items off our bucket list. But it's also good to find those destinations where you can kind of decompress. And I think now, especially with your kids being older, I know once my daughter got a little bit older, I would let her help pick the destination. More often than not, she was picking Disney. And one year I was like, Sam, like, we've been to
We're done.
Orlando, we've been to California. Like, no.
I have all these parks memorized.
I was like, please pick a new destination. And then she was chit-chatting one time with one of my coworkers. My coworker had went to Thailand. So my daughter Samantha's like, well, can we go to Thailand next year? And I was like, oh boy, you sure you don't want to just go to Disney? Or no. And at this point, I think she was 11 or 12. And that was like a first really big trip that we have done. Prior to that, we did like more, either domestic or the Caribbean. But Thailand was the first big destination. But it was exciting because she was the one who headed that trip. She picked it. So to this day, has been one of the best trips that we have gone on as a family. So Thailand holds a very special place in my heart. So yes, it does.
So
Nice.
we do this for milestone birthdays. The kids get to pick the destination and pick what we do. So for my oldest, it's been Hawaii twice. The 10th birthday, we went to Kauai. This 15th, we went to the Big Island. They just love sand. They love playing at the beach. They love just Hawaii in general. To them, it's relaxing and beautiful and fun. My oldest, she picked Paris. My daughter, she picked Paris. Yeah. Because she is a dancer.
Smart.
She's been doing ballet since she was 3. And she said, I want to go where ballet started. And I said, well, if we're going all the way to Europe, I'm not just going for a week. So we tacked on a week in Lisbon as well.
You got to maximize it.
You do what you got to do.
but it was really fun. Like she helped me pick, the agenda, and we did she wanted to do all the art museums. So we did the Louvre, we did the Musée d'Orsay. It was really important for her to see a ballet in Paris. So we saw the Paris Ballet perform Midsummer Night's Dream at the Opera Bastille. It was so amazing, like one of the most beautiful ballet performances. And we regularly go see the SF Ballet. So it was just such a beautiful, unique experience to be there as a family and to, see this performance in front of us. It was just amazing. We went to Versailles and she loved it. We ate a lot of croissants and crepes off the street,
My kind of trip.
happy. Yeah, exactly.
Give me the carbs.
Gosh, I
All
love
of the
Paris so much. I'm still bitter. My high school that I went to, I took French for all 4 years, and they started the Europe trips the year after I graduated, and I will never forgive them. And
Heartbreaking.
yes, former
Yeah.
high school, I am going to keep this in the final recording. I will never forgive you for starting those trips after I graduate, because that would have been the
I feel the
dream.
same.
Like as a
I know.
teenager going to Paris, it's so romantic.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I mean, I know for us, we travel as a family of 3. And it could be expensive. So I can imagine for you guys are traveling as a family of 4. At least when they're little, you can kind of save costs when it comes to like accommodations, a lot of attractions. Sometimes they have like free activities that you can do, especially when the kids are younger, or after like a certain age, maybe a discount. But once they get older, like even for us, my daughter now, she's 19 years old. So whenever we travel somewhere, we obviously have to have accommodations that fits 3 adults. We're buying tickets to attractions, we're paying for 3 adults. So it really does add up. And then again, you're traveling as 3 adults. That means like food. So it adds up very, very quickly. So do you have any travel tips on like, especially for families? Like how can you save some money?
So, a couple of things. I do play the points game a bit. I am not a points power user. I don't get a million points a year. I do not have the mental bandwidth to keep track of that many credit cards. I am so proud of those people who do. I don't. But we definitely have figured out a point strategy that works for us using 2 main cards, and then just alternating based on what we're purchasing to really get enough points to get some free stuff pretty much every time we travel, right? So like most recently when we went to Hawaii, we used the points for the rental car. My husband and I went on a cruise. We used the points for the hotel before the cruise. Usually we're using points here and there to help us. In terms of accommodations, when we went to Europe this summer, we found that Airbnb was our best bet. So because in Europe, the hotels usually don't have room for 4 people, and those are the most expensive rooms when they do, we found with an Airbnb, it was much cheaper. We could get 2 bedrooms. Yeah, we didn't get breakfast with it, but we would stop at the market and pick up some bread and cheese and stuff for us to have in the kitchen. So that way when they got up slowly, they could snack on something a little bit before we went out for the day. And plus, almost all the Airbnbs had a washer dryer, or this is Europe, a washer with a drying rack, which let us, wash our clothes along the way. And so we did carry on only. So one, carry on only. I've taught my children, we do not pack more than a couple of days worth of clothes because we don't need to. We can do it. And so it always saves them. I never pay for checking luggage ever. Again, Airbnbs tend to be our cheaper option with more space. So that allows us. Now, when we can't do an Airbnb, we will book a hotel, and I'll often do 2 double beds. So when we went to Hawaii this last time, when we were on the Big Island, we did a suite that had 2 bedrooms, a condo with a full kitchen. Like it was a suite condo with a full kitchen, 2 bedrooms. The kids had their own space. We had our own space. That was a great place to be. But then at last minute, we tacked on a couple days in Waikiki, and we decided to stay in the Hilton Oceanfront Garden Resort, the big one right there, Waikiki at the end. And it was a beautiful resort, but we were only booking for a couple days and it was kind of expensive. So I booked 1 room and it had 2 double beds. And everyone's like,
Do what you need
we're
to
all
do.
squeezed in this room. And I'm like, it's 3 days. You'll all survive.
You'll live.
Yeah.
You'll live.
Like you're in Hawaii, there's
Exactly.
worse things right now than sharing a room in Hawaii.
Exactly. So, that's honestly, we try our best to get the bigger accommodations when we can, and it's cheaper, and that usually ends up through Airbnb. But if for whatever reason we have to stay in a hotel, we book 1 room with 2 beds and we just work it out. because that's what's going to be the cheaper option. In terms of flights, we do use our points a lot to fly. My family is based in New Jersey off Newark Airport, which is having a lot of fun these days. And we're based out of San Francisco, which is also a United hub. So for better or for worse, we fly a lot of United.
Same, girl. Same. I'm
Right?
trapped.
Exactly.
We
You know,
love you, United. We love you.
exactly. But we've got the United credit card. We have Chase credit cards that we can push points to. And then my husband does a lot of business travel and pushes as much in United as possible. So we do try and we tend to use a lot of points to fly on United, which is really helpful for us. And then, like I said, but if we can't go through United, we'll use our credit card points to kind of get wherever, whatever we can get. So when we went to Europe, we used our points to book 2 of our tickets on Air France, and then we paid for 2 other tickets. So, that was like a $3,000 or $4,000 savings right there. So, wherever we can to kind of like save some of the money. Now, food is another issue entirely.
That's a hard one.
We try.
Yeah.
I always try to have a place where we can have breakfast foods available, right, in our room. So, and then I'll always Instacart right away. I'll Instacart some waffles, some cereal, some milk, coffee, a couple different breakfast items, granola bars, and fruit, just so that way there's food in the room for breakfast. And that usually is 70% of the time tides us over for breakfast. But who doesn't want to go out and try the macadamia nut pancakes?
Yeah.
Oh, my food budget's horrific.
Yeah. That's the one place I don't set a budget when I try. Like we
I know.
kind of set a budget. Like we'll say like, okay, let's say we want to spend $1,000 or whatever the case is. But that never really happens. But
No.
when I'm booking like reservations for restaurants, I look at the menu, and more often
Yeah.
than not, you know what's within like your budget.
Right.
And like our rule of thumb is like we're usually pretty good. Same thing as you, Robin. Like if we're staying like in an Airbnb or if we're staying in a hotel, if there is breakfast, like even if it's like a small like bagels or whatever the case is, we try to definitely maximize on that, because now we're essentially just having to pay for like lunch and dinner, and like our like lifestyle's a little bit different when we're traveling, so we're not eating like really big meals like we do back home as much, so we save some money that way. But ahead of time, I more or less know that we're going to restaurants that are within like our typical budget. But I'm usually pretty bad. My husband says, like, don't you have an accounting degree? And I'm like, yeah, but like, I don't know how to manage my own money.
You're better than me.
I am.
Oh my gosh.
I just don't exist when I travel.
Gosh, my budget is there is no budget. So you're better than me.
But it is hard. It is hard when you're traveling
really
as a family. So it's like you have to, within reason, stay within a certain number.
I remember when I realized that, I remember someone telling me when my oldest was about 5 years old, at some point, they're still going to be young enough to eat off the children's menu, but they're going to be hungry enough to want to eat off the adult menu. I'm like, I don't know what you were talking about. I'm a girl. My oldest was born male. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a little girl. My parents used to lie about my age for like 2 or 3 years afterwards to make me eat off the children's menu, right? And then my oldest turned 8 and ate everything on their plate, everything that their little sister didn't finish, and ate some off me and my husband's plate. And I was like, crap.
That's what you meant.
Love it. I love it. They're a foodie. That's a good thing.
They are foodie. And I mean, now my 15-year-old is almost 6 foot tall, bigger than me, and inherited my husband's palate that loves everything. I remember one day we're like, what do you want for dinner? He's like, do you want sushi? Can we go for sushi? I'm like, why did I ever introduce you to sushi? Expensive.
Are you sure you don't want McDonald's? Let's go to the dollar menu.
You can order 5 of them.
Yeah. This is expensive, so maybe the sushi's better.
Now we try to keep it, we'll usually do like 1 or 2 really nice higher end meals a trip because we like to experience those kinds of restaurants. And my husband really likes to try those, and we've now introduced our children to it. But after that, we'll try to keep it to more like moderate menus, street eats, things like that. But definitely food budget it's one we continue to struggle with.
Yeah, that's my biggest struggle, even when I travel by myself. But same for us. Our rule of thumb, we typically will say, oh, we'll have like our fancy night, like our last night, and that's that's when we really like will splurge like on a really nice restaurant. But even then, I know when we went to Paris, I picked this one place that my friend recommended, and I knew it was gonna be expensive just from the pictures, and like the menu had no pricing.
Yeah, I
So
usually
when
get
I
that.
got there, I was like, oh wow, like yeah, I knew it was gonna be
Oopsies.
pricey, but like my husband's like, wait, you're spending how much for like a piece of steak? He's like, okay, Rosa. I was like, well, I'll get the points in miles, so whatever.
Yeah,
It'll even
you're
out.
getting paid in points. It's okay. And I always say the credit cards is not real money.
I was like,
So
but it's so
Exactly.
pretty. It's so pretty in here. So yeah, so food, that's a big one. But like you said, even like, I know for me, I always joke around because like I always have to have snacks
Yeah.
because like I'm always hungry, but then like I eat like a bird. Like we'll go out to eat and I never finish my meal. Like I'm just the worst. I'm constantly hungry. So I always pack snacks. But I think that's important. I know like when we went
Yeah.
to like let's say Disney and we were like in Universal, that was a huge money saver because we had the snacks there. So like if Samantha wanted something, I didn't have to spend like $20 on popcorn.
Yeah,
I would just give her
exactly.
whatever snacks. So that's also a way that you could kind of, save a little bit of money. Like even like you said too, I know like when we went to Japan, we bought a lot of the stuff at 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
So that was a great money saver. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where we got our breakfast in the one hotel when we were in Tokyo. So that's a way that you can save, especially when traveling, as a family or with the group.
I always Instacart, when I Instacart groceries to the room or the Airbnb or whatever, I always include snacks that can fit in my day bag to keep away the hungries, as they say, from the kids. Recently, we went to Disneyland with the Girl Scouts, and I did something interesting with my kids because we were going with the whole Girl Scout, and I was the chaperone, though I did also bring along my oldest child. A lot of the girls were there without their parents. And so I actually gave the kids money and I said, this is your money for the whole trip, for all the food you're going to eat, for any souvenirs you're going to buy, for any snacks you want to buy. You have to budget this out over the 3 days that we're at Disney. And it was really interesting to watch them figure out how to do that because they're used to me just going and paying for everything. And so like my daughter really started to take into factor like, okay, how much is that meal? Do I really need that whole meal?
Yeah.
Okay, I could order the kids' meal, right? And she also did things like, I don't need dinner, I'll eat a Mickey pretzel instead. I mean, maybe not the best choices, but she had enough money left over for all the souvenirs she wanted to buy.
You're teaching them life lessons.
yeah.
But I thought it was really important if the other girls were there without parents and had to budget on their own. I wanted to make sure that my kids would know how to budget as well and that they didn't,
Sure.
and it didn't feel fair. Like if one kid was like calculating how much they had to spend and then someone else had their mom there who would pay for everything.
Yeah.
And it's good. It
Yeah.
teaches them the concept of money. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
funny because I'm sure if you were paying, they're like, yeah, I'll have the pretzel, a hot dog, some popcorn. But
Yeah,
now they're like,
exactly.
not with my
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No.
So yeah,
I
that
still
was
feel
really
like I
helpful.
need an allowance. My goodness.
Yeah, I just got back from 2 trips and I was looking at my credit card bill. I was like, damn, I really could have used an allowance on this trip.
My God. Yeah, that I was looking today. I was just like, okay.
Thankfully, this is not a financial podcast.
No,
We're not
no.
here to teach you how to
Yeah.
save money, apparently.
We teach you how to live the best experiences you can.
Yeah.
And then complain after.
Yeah, exactly. The memories are worth it though.
Yeah.
So, speaking of amazing memories, I know sometimes like I hear this from families at work, they want to travel, but they're like not sure where to go. Maybe the planning process is a little overwhelming. So, do you have any particular cities or destinations that really stand out to you as great family destinations for anyone looking to get started with family travel?
Sure. So, as Rosa was mentioning, when they're younger, like beach resort vacations are super easy. They usually have a kids club there. Kids love the beach. Anywhere in the Caribbean, if you're on the East Coast, Hawaii, if you're on the West Coast, any of the beaches in Mexico, those are always great vacations, especially when they're younger. They're just a little bit easier. And of course, always you have the amusement parks, the Disneys and the
Yeah, we did a lot of
like,
that when I was a kid.
yeah,
Florida, the beach, and I loved it. I
exactly.
like lived in the water as a kid.
That's
No,
so funny. One thing I always wanted to do when I was a kid was go camping, but my parents were not about that life. And when I got older, I was like, this is pretty cool. I was like, and it's actually an affordable way to
it
be
is.
able to like explore locally too.
I was going to say, so camping is another great one. We did not do a lot of that. To be honest, my husband's from India and just had not wrapped his head around the concept of camping. Why would you do that when you could live indoors? But we've done a little bit of it. The kids like it, but to be honest, I'm kind of at the point where I need a bed, so I'm done over camping. The other place I was going to say that was surprisingly kid friendly that I took my kids to was Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I took my kids when they were 3 and 18 months. I had a month-long sabbatical from work, and so we decided to spend it in Buenos Aires. Got an apartment. That city was so incredibly family friendly. I remember we would get on a bus with the stroller and like the front would clear out for us to sit down and be there with the stroller, like without even asking. Every neighborhood of the city had these beautiful, brightly colored playgrounds that were available, and that's where all the families hung out. It was very European in that way, in that like the kind of third space. After work or after school let out, you would see all the families there, and the moms would all be sitting there drinking their tea or beer nearby, and the kids were all playing. It was just a fantastic place to be. Every restaurant we went to had a high chair. I mean, every restaurant. We went to a random restaurant at the side of the street, and they would all have a high chair. My toddler was very active at that point and really liked to run around. And in the US, I would constantly be yelled at to keep my child under control. And I couldn't believe how the waiters and waitresses would play with them.
Oh,
Nice.
that's nice.
There was one time a singer came in and was singing, and my daughter insisted on going up to him because she just was fascinated. And I was like trying to pull her away. And then he just picked her up, held her, and finished the rest of his set.
It's the
That's
cutest
sweet.
thing ever. That's
That was sweet.
adorable.
Right? So I just couldn't believe how beautiful and family friendly and easy Buenos Aires was. Like it was really one of the easiest trips we did with the kids when they were young that age. So if you're looking to go international and try something different, that is my top choice internationally.
Has there been any destination that you're just like, oof, this was a rough one?
Let's see. Not destination, but days. So the worst travel day we ever had to be the day we went to Amber Fort in India with my daughter. Now, at the time, I didn't think through this. We were in the middle of the desert. I wasn't drinking enough water. I was a little dehydrated. So even though my daughter was nursing at the time, she still wasn't getting enough. And I didn't understand why she was fussy. And then at the same time, this was before our oldest got diagnosed with some of their sensory issues. And we didn't, and we took this kid to India filled with crowds,
Yeah.
noise, people. I started to notice he was getting irritated, and then he sat in his stroller, and the stroller had this big sunshades, and we thought it was funny because he would pull the sunshade as far over as he could. And we were laughing, oh, look at him, he's in his little cocoon, ha ha ha, not realizing, right? And then at some point, like it was still too loud, it was still too hot, it was still too much, so we started to cry and cry and cry. And I mean, this is India. You hear babies crying all the time. This kid was over the crowd in Amber Fort, screaming its head off to the point that the guard came over and asked my husband to leave with the kid.
No.
Oh,
Okay? Yeah. um,
I mean, we have
you
those days
have
too,
to,
you
yeah.
you
know?
have to be
Travel's not always
loud.
glamorous.
You have to be loud to be screaming so much over the noise of Amber Fort in India.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Good vocals.
funny enough, was after that we got diagnosed, and we're like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Oh, poor thing.
And again, he didn't know, we didn't know, right?
No.
And so we were just really sad because we ended up like rushing through and leaving Amber Fort, not really getting to experience this thing that we wanted to experience, but also we just felt like bad parents, right? Both our kids are fussy. We can't understand why. Everyone's crying. And like, I at first was not worried about the fact that he was crying because you hear crying babies in India all the time. But like when he got so loud and shrill and over everyone, I realized like, oh, Oh, this is
Something's
actually
up.
a big problem. And
Yeah.
sure enough, honestly, after we got him outside Amber Fort into the shade and away from people,
He was fine.
it's fine.
All
Yeah.
good.
And that's the
Aw.
thing, with travel, especially with traveling with kids, or even, sometimes some adults, maybe they have mobility issues, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
It's not always going to be fun. And like you said earlier, you have to pack your patience no matter who you're
Yes.
traveling with, what their age is, because,
Yeah.
travel is not always glamorous. And you're going to have those days where you're just going to be like, you know what, I just want to pack my stuff. I just want to go back home, be back in my comfort zone. But that's the whole point of traveling. You're getting to experience new destination and you're pushing yourself, and you're also teaching your kids to push themselves outside of their comfort zone and experience these destinations. And those are life lessons that they're going to take away with them as they get older.
So, I mean, it was really good. Like I said, neither my oldest nor my daughter, well, they don't usually have tantrums like that anymore.
Mhm.
The 13-year-old, she's 13ing these days.
Yeah, that says it all. 13, that's a fun age. That
That's
is
a
a fun
hard
age.
age. I always
It
say, and I've heard this
is.
so much, that like if you're in the education program, if you can teach middle school, you can handle high school and elementary school with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
It's a hard age. I knew
It
right away I was
is.
not cut out for middle school. I'm like, give me the high school seniors. 13 is hard.
Yeah, I would agree. And I am trying to remember what I was like at that age and trying to
I
have
was awful.
patience. I was terrible.
It was the
I mean,
same.
I was terrible. But I'm lucky in that she does talk to me and tell me what's going on, but she's definitely 13ing at times. Like, we just had this trip to Hawaii and I told her to try on her bathing suits before we went on the trip. And she said, I just tried them on in February and they fit, Mom. Well, Mom knew that she had grown an inch and a half between February and now
Oh no.
and suggested that maybe she should try them on. And she insisted that they were fine. So we got to Hawaii and they were not, in fact, fine. I know. It's a shocker. So she did the
Man.
whole trip with one bottom and two swim shirts that we found. Because the other thing is finding a swimsuit for a 13-year-old girl in adult sizes is not an easy task
Yeah.
at all these days, right?
Finding a swimsuit, period.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. It is. Yeah, it's a life lesson. She may actually even learn it at some point. I know.
But
He's
yeah.
so impressed when my students come back to visit me after like a year or two at work or a year or two in college, and they're such mature little adults. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. I'm even like a proud mom.
I mean, I know I never really like experienced like with my daughter kind of having like an outrage when she was older. Obviously, we're going to destinations. I'm
Mhm.
sure there were times that she missed certain things back home, like a birthday or getting to hang out with friends. So I know there are some times during certain trips that we've gone on where I can kind of see that she was like a little upset because she was missing out on something.
Mhm.
But just recently, like I'm part of like a mom group, and somebody posted on Facebook that I forget the destination that they were in, but their son, I think it's like 14 years old or something like that. He was just like miserable, complaining the whole trip. And I was like, that is rough. And, she was saying
Yeah.
she felt so defeated. She was like, we're on day 2 of this 1 week trip or whatever the case is. And she was like, do you moms have any tips or suggestions? And I'm like, man, that sucks.
It's hard. Yeah. I don't
And they're
know.
at that age, like, what
Yeah.
do you even do? Like, I don't know. Like, thankfully, I've never been in that situation. Like I said, with my daughter, like, I can tell she was sometimes like, oh, do we really have to go on that trip or do we really have to do that? But she's never, been to the point that she's miserable or making us feel like, okay, like, I don't want to be here. So I felt so bad. I was like, I honestly had
I
no
have no clue.
suggestions.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe find activities that he, is
Yeah.
excited for or something.
I would say, and it's a little late for her at that point when they're already on the trip, but I would say what you did and what I tried to do as well is including the kids in the planning of the trip is key. It's how you get their buy-in, right?
For sure.
I wanted to do the snorkeling trip to the Captain Cook Memorial where the fish were supposed to be really beautiful, but my oldest wanted to snorkel with the manta rays. I mean, that wasn't a bad trip either, right? But I needed their buy-in. It was their trip. When we went to Europe, I had them help me look up what memorials we were. I had them listen to the books beforehand. And then also when they were tired, I let them take a day, right? Like, I'm like, all right, do you guys just want to hang out in the Airbnb and your dad and I will go and get a drink or whatever? And they're like, yeah, we're fine. Oh, and that helped too. Like keeping in your eye. Maybe the kid just needed a break. Also, I do try to steer away from some of these activities as well, right? A couple years ago, husband got the chance to do a conference, speak at a conference in Rome, and I really wanted to go. And I was checking with the kids, and they're like, "Well, that's not a good time for leaving my dance class. That's not a good time for school. There's testing going on at that point." And I was like, "Oh man, I guess we're not going to Rome." And then my mom called up, and she's like, "Well, why don't I come and take care of the kids, and you go to Rome with your husband?" And I was like, "That's a good idea."
That is a good idea. That's the perfect idea.
Thanks, Mom.
Brilliant idea.
I mean, yes, I would have loved to show them everything in Rome and all the historical things, but they were not prepared, or that wasn't good timing on the trip for them. And so I respected their boundaries and I went without them. You know, that's kind of what you can do.
Yeah, because I feel having taught teenagers for many years, they like to feel, like you said, included in the planning process. They like it when you talk honestly to them. Like a lot of the times, what I do when we're at the end of the unit and it's time to do a project, I have them all be fun projects, but I give them a choice board. And I'm like, whatever you guys want to do, you pick one. And then I'll always have a square, like, pick your project, just see me for approval first. And sometimes they'll come up with things on their own, but they're like more to do it because I've included them while still sticking with the standards of what New Jersey wants. So I do feel like they love that. They like feeling like you're taking their input seriously.
They want to feel like a little adult. So,
For sure.
And yeah, as they get older, you can put them in charge of more and more things, right? So for their 10th birthday, like, yeah, they picked the place, but I picked all the flights and I helped them research what we should see and what we should not see, right? For this Quince trip, I was like, just gotta give me the vibes. What are we doing? For the Disneyland trip, my daughter planned it with our Girl Scout troop. We really were the chaperones. We gave them a budget and they drove the whole thing. It was actually kind of cool.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
That's empowering for them. I love that.
Yeah. So there's exactly, well, I mean, to be fair, how can Disneyland not be fun, right? With
For sure.
the bunch of your girlfriends. Come on.
For
But
sure.
I was going to say, but it was really fun to see them get excited and engaged and plan things and budget and think about how they were going to like spend the money that they had, So yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, I was gonna say I was even amused. They came up with a shower schedule.
I love that. It's like
those are
they put
important,
them
though.
down to the letter. That is like so good. I want them to write my itinerary. Sometimes I like miss things. So be like, can you do this for me? Make sure I schedule time to
just plan everything. But I was going to say, it's good, especially as a parent, because you're seeing them develop those life skills. And I know something recently, especially like after COVID, I know a lot of parents still opted to keep their kids like homeschooling and the whole concept of world schooling. But I do agree with that to a certain extent because like you do learn a lot, whether it's having to navigate transportation, whether it's learning to communicate with someone when they don't speak the same language that you do. Even something as simple as, exchanging currency, understanding those concepts. So I think travel, at whatever age is really, really important, but especially when they are young and developing these skills. And I know for myself, we always joke around with my daughter. I give her the phone and I'm like, all right, Sam, tell us where to go. What train do we take? And like, she is on it. And just recently, my husband and I did a trip together and I was like, I miss Sam. I miss somebody telling me where to go because she's really good with directions and navigating things. And also too, I know for myself, just seeing things from your child's perspective, it was also something very, very special. Even though my daughter's older, like just seeing her perspective on things. I mean, I know for me, that brings me a lot of joy. So I do think that having some type of travel incorporated into your life with your kids is definitely important. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be going to trips to Europe or to Thailand. It could be domestic things. It could be day trips in your own city and exploring locally that'll help them develop these life skills that are very important. And also too, like meeting people that they normally wouldn't see back home, right? Or they normally engage with. I feel like that also allows them to also be more sympathetic and see how other people live.
Yeah, it was really interesting. The kids, particularly when we were in Europe this summer, were asking a lot of things and trying to understand the differences between like the European culture and the American culture, right? And in particular in the news and lots of things that were going on at that time, they were asking a lot of these big questions about like, well, why don't we do this? And how is Europe able to do this? And we kind of talked about that. When we were in Bali, we did a tour of a local village and school, and they got to see the school kids. They actually got to play soccer or football on the grounds with the school kids, and they got to see the way some people live in Bali. And so it gave them much more of appreciation of the lifestyle that they have and the experiences that they get to have. So that's always been really important to me. And I do remember India. We haven't been to India in a while. We're actually going to be going this December, but India it can be a lot for people. And I remember the last time we went, my oldest was old enough to have some memories then and was looking, and there was a little girl begging, right, going in the cars in the highway begging, and he was like, well, why? Where's her mom?
Yeah.
Why is she asking that? And we had to have the hard conversation
Yeah.
about the poverty that can exist in that country. And it's hard because, our family in India is middle class, well off, likely live in a nice enclosed, guarded community. And we have a driver and a cook. And so there's some of that's hidden from them when they're in there. But then as soon as you go into the streets, you see it. There's no hiding from it in India.
Yeah. And it's like you said, like by taking these trips, I feel like they're so educational. Like I said, like I never mind when my students travel outside of the school break, especially because a lot of them have family overseas. So like sometimes it doesn't always like fit into a week. And I feel like it's such a valuable education because you're learning how to connect with the world around you and you're seeing
Yeah.
these things and it makes you like more empathetic and aware.
Yeah. No, it's really, really important. I agree. We took the kids to Washington, D.C. one year. We took them out of school for a week because we were going to a wedding that was near Washington, D.C. And I'm like, well, I'm not taking all my kids across the country and not showing them the nation's capital, right? And it was funny because all of the teachers were so excited by this. And they included Washington, D.C. in all of the makeup work, right? They were like, my daughter had to do a presentation about the three branches of governments with pictures first. We had to go to the Supreme Court because she could have her picture for her presentation. And so it was really nice. And like I said, I've always found that the teachers have generally been really accommodating because they agree, like a week in Washington, D.C., they're going to learn way more than they are in a week in
So
school.
much.
Yeah,
And that's always my one
exactly.
assignment is like, show me
Yeah,
pictures. I want to hear all about
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
If you do that, like we'll be good.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's really great.
I think we touched on a lot of great things, but if you had to give one piece of advice for someone who maybe they're considering they want to take, maybe, their child is a little bit younger and they're not necessarily sure if they're ready to embark on traveling, what would be your go-to tip for someone who's kind of contemplating whether or not they want to go ahead and, take this adventure?
start small if you're really scared, right? Do a full day trip. Go to your local city or park or something and pack for the full day, be out for the full day and see how that goes. And then if that's good, go on a weekend adventure, right? Go on a, weekend trip away. If you're really scared, it's okay to start small. You don't have to jump on a plane like I did and fly to India. Not everyone is that crazy, and I fully understand that fact, right? But the more that you get out, even on these daily adventures, the more comfortable you and your kids get with that experience. So my kids know, even on a day adventure, they know how to pack a day bag for themselves. They know to have the battery backup and the snacks and the sunglasses, right? And they're excited about doing adventures outside now, right? So adventures big and small are exciting to them. And so if you are really nervous about it, start small. And I would also say start young. The younger you start, the better, because then they grow up with it, they're used to it, and they don't know any different. It's actually harder to start later. Like I said, that trip to India with a 9-month-old was so hard. With a 3-month-old was a breeze, right?
Love it.
So that like mobile stage to understanding stage, what would you say, Rosa? Like 3, 4 years old?
Yeah.
But that's
That toddler.
that's probably the hardest time because they don't yet know to listen. But I'm telling you, if you start young and you keep going, you learn, not only does your child learn the adventures, but you also learn how to adapt. You learn what your child's needs are and how to manage them and handle them in all different situations. So it's really a learning experience for both.
Yeah. And it's okay if you're the one crying instead of your child because
Yeah.
like I said, that one time I forgot my daughter's formula. Like, I was like, Michael, you hold this kid because, like, oh my God, I need to, like, get up and go to the bathroom. Because I feel so awful. I was like, but I can't sit here and cry in front of my child. It's probably going to spark her to start crying again.
Yeah.
If you're the grown up who's crying on the trip, that's perfectly fine, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
And
okay.
everything
happens.
is
It
going to be
happens.
smooth and everything's going to be perfect. You just got to roll with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, roll with it. You can do it. We're all here for you. We're cheering for you.
Exactly. But just take the trip. Even if you just start small, just take it. Take your kids out. You will be so happy you did it, and your kid will be too. I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my mom started by taking me into Philadelphia to see the art museum, and those
There
are
you
some
go.
really great memories. So there you
Yeah.
go. You don't have to start big. Just do it.
No.
Just do the trip.
That's what I say. Yeah. I'm a Jersey girl. So many trips to the Liberty Bell and the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, 1000%.
Exactly.
I know that was like me going into New York City. I always thought it was such a cool adventure seeing like the buildings,
Yeah.
same thing. You grew up in New Jersey. My whole life lived here. So going into New York as a little girl, I was like, whoa, look at these tall buildings. That was an adventure on its own. And like, you know, like you said, Rachel, too, like you have these fond memories. And sometimes we don't think about that, but I know like for myself, reminiscing on these trips that I had when I was younger with my parents, they hold a special place in my heart. So it's like you're building these memories. Doesn't matter how
Yeah.
old your child gets, they're going to remember
For
some of these
sure.
instances. Maybe not necessarily, I don't remember things when I was like 1 or 2, but I do have these fond memories when I'm a little bit older. So thank you so much, Robin. It was so much
Thank
fun
you.
having you on the show.
Thank you.
So where can people find you on social?
Sure. You can find me. My blog is aroundtheworldwithkids.net. My Instagram is Around the World with Kids blog. Same for my Facebook, and my TikTok is Around the World with Kids because I forgot to put the blog at the end. That's okay. But yeah, you can find me all there. And there I share tips, tricks, articles that I write, places that we go, ways to save money, and just, some encouragement to go out and take the adventure with your kids.
Thank you. We love it so
All
much.
right.
So now you know, besties, whether you're prepping for your first big adventure or just dreaming of your next getaway, we really hope you walking away with some ideas to make your trip smoother and definitely memorable. So we'll make sure to link Robin's information on the show notes. So make sure to give her a follow. And as always, if you have any questions, let us know. We're always here to try to help you as best as possible. Again, we might not be the best with financial advice, but we will make sure you have fun.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You'll have lots of wonderful memories. So thank you as always for listening. Give Robin a follow. And we love you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Bon Voyage Besties.